Whether you invest in US stocks or you plan to in the future, the upcoming 2024 US election could make or break your investments. It's a very complex topic for any non-US residents to dive into, but fortunately for you, I have been studying the US economy for the last couple of years. So in this video, I will break down and summarize everything you need to know as a total beginner to the US politics and what you can expect depending on who wins the White House. Now, before we dive into the economic impacts, you need to first know that the US government is divided into three branches: legislative, which makes the laws; executive, which enforces the laws; and judicial, which interprets the laws, basically the courts. But for this discussion today, we are focusing solely on the executive branch, where the presidency holds the most power in shaping economic policies, trade agreements, and also tax regulations, all of which will be crucial for investors like you and I to understand. So for this 2024 election, Americans have two main choices: Kamala Harris, who is running on behalf of the Democrats, the blue team, and then there's Donald Trump, who is once again front running for the Republicans, basically the red team. So to understand how this election might affect the economy, we must first look beyond the current candidates and understand the fundamental ideological differences between the two major parties. You have likely heard terms like liberal for Democrats and conservative for Republicans, or left and right-leaning. But what do they truly mean in the context of their economic policies, and how will they influence the market and even our investments? Well, the Democrats are generally seen as left-leaning or liberal. In economic terms, this means they believe in a larger role for the government. They favor government intervention in the economy through regulation, social welfare programs, and progressive taxation. They advocate for policies that aim to reduce income inequality and provide essential services like healthcare and education to all citizens, regardless of their economic standing. But on non-economic fronts, they typically support issues like gun control and also reproductive rights, which includes support for abortion rights. But that's not the point of this video. Now, on the other side, Republicans or the red team are considered right-leaning or conservative, and economically, conservatives favor a smaller government role in business, believing that a free market without excessive regulations encourages innovation, job creation, and also wealth creation. Conservatives believe that individuals should be responsible for their own success, and that government interference often only leads to inefficiencies and even corruption. And socially, their policies tend to emphasize tradition, individual responsibility, and a more limited role for government in day-to-day life. So socially, they are on the other side of the spectrum as compared to the liberals or the Democrats, where they typically advocate for traditional values like supporting gun rights, religious freedom, and even opposing policies like abortion. But that said, it's also important for me to note for you that what is considered left or right can easily vary across different countries and even historical periods. But for the purpose of this discussion, we'll just stick to their US definitions. So now that we have laid out the ideological foundations, let's explore what might happen if Kamala Harris or Donald Trump wins in November. Their policies will shape different sectors of the economy in very distinct ways. If Kamala wins the presidency, her policies will largely align with the current Biden administration. Basically, America is expected to spend more on climate change, clean energy, and even more money in the pockets of low-income consumers. One key area of focus for Kamala is green energy. Democrats are pushing to reduce the country's reliance on fossil fuels, which means that sectors like solar energy, wind power, and even electric vehicles, EVs, could see significant growth. The Biden administration has already invested heavily in these areas, and Kamala would most likely continue this trend down the road. So it's pretty safe to say that companies involved in clean energy, battery technology, and even charging infrastructure could benefit if she wins, just like how Next Era Energy benefited from this whole ordeal. And also, the Democrats' focus on electric vehicles is another major policy point. Kamala has supported policies that aim to transition the US from petrol-driven cars to electric vehicles, meaning companies in the EV space could see an uptick in demand. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Trump has been doubting the role of electric vehicles compared to the traditional auto vehicles. But interestingly enough, after receiving an endorsement from Elon Musk himself, Trump apparently changed his mind and said, "I'm for electric cars. I have to be because Elon endorsed me very strongly." And in addition to energy policy, Kamala is a strong proponent of expanding healthcare access. If she wins, we can expect the Democrats to push for an expansion of Medicare, which would include added benefits like dental, vision, and also hearing coverage. And this could create more demand for pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and healthcare services, as more people will be covered under federal programs. But now, if Donald Trump returns to the White House, we'll probably see a sharp contrast in policy direction, more specifically on defense, energy, and also lower taxes. He is expected to increase military spending, especially with rising tensions between the US and China, like how he ballooned that budget to $738 billion in 2020, because to him, peace requires strength. And he believes that the best way to prevent aggression is by threatening enemies with severe consequences. This is debatable, but I'll leave it as that. But what's certain is his vision of a stronger US military means that defense companies like Lockheed Martin and also Raytheon Technologies could benefit, including those that produce weapons, military technology, and other defense-related products. And also, Trump is a supporter of domestic energy production, particularly in oil and gas sector. And during his previous term, Trump rolled back numerous environmental regulations to boost fossil fuel industries and also promote energy independence, like how he withdrew from the Paris Agreement in 2017, arguing that it restricted US energy production. So, if Trump wins, we should see traditional oil and gas companies benefiting from a reduction in regulations and also increased domestic energy production needs. Anyway, putting the industries aside, one of the most notable differences between liberal and conservative policies comes down to taxes, something that will greatly affect the entire American economy, which will also trickle down to foreign investors like you and I. Kamala Harris and the Democrats believe in a progressive tax system where wealthier individuals and corporations pay a higher share of taxes. To them, this is essential to fund social programs like healthcare, infrastructure, and education, and hence why they support raising the corporate tax rate to 28%, up from the current 21%, to help pay for these programs, which they believe will also help in reducing income inequality. The consequences? Well, if you haven't guessed it already, this could also mean lesser profits after tax for many American businesses, which ultimately means a reduction in their share price. Now, on the other hand, Donald Trump and the Republicans want a lower tax bracket. During Trump's first term, he passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which lowered the corporate tax rate from a enormous 35% to the current 21%, resulting in an estimated $91 billion of taxes saved in 2018 alone, which significantly boosted stock buybacks for many companies. So if he wins this election, he plans to cut it further, potentially down to 15%. Their argument is that lower taxes spur economic growth by giving businesses more money to reinvest in their operations, hire more workers, innovate, create more jobs, and even attract more investments, which will then prop up the entire American economy. And in case you missed it, Trump is well known for supporting the use of tariffs to protect US industries from foreign competition, particularly from their arch nemesis, China, which aligns well with his America First ideology. So if he wins this time around, we may see increased tariffs on Chinese goods, which could impact the global supply chains through higher manufacturing costs, especially in the electronics and manufacturing sectors. Now, another important issue is the minimum wage, which is also another key point that makes the difference between left-leaning and right-leaning economic policies. Kamala and the Democrats argue that the minimum wage needs to be increased. They believe the current wage doesn't keep up with the cost of living, especially in high-cost areas like California, where even full-time minimum wage workers struggle to afford housing. A report from National Low Income Housing Coalition shows that the average minimum wage worker in the US will need to work roughly 97 hours per week to afford the average 2-bedroom home, and that 97 hours per week is more than 2 full-time jobs combined already. So by raising the minimum wage, the Democrats believe it will help lift people out of poverty and also reduce economic inequality. Now, on the other hand, Trump and the Republicans take a free market approach, like what I've mentioned earlier, and hence why they don't really talk about minimum wages. So in general, they believe that wages should be determined by the market itself, not the government, and they argued that raising the minimum wage would hurt smaller businesses and eventually lead to layoffs, making it harder for companies to hire workers. They believe individuals should negotiate their own wages or look for jobs that offer better pay themselves rather than relying on government mandates, which to his point is a fair assessment because a raise in minimum wage would also just lead to an inflation in prices, and that endless loop would result in a wage price spiral that, let's just say, will not end well. So you might ask, how does this affect the stock market? Well, I can't tell you for sure, but what I can do for you is show you some historical data that I've collected, hopefully to give you a little insight based on the past, because history tends to repeat itself. But just to be mindful that the market in the past has been subjected to many other big events like financial crisis, pandemic, wars, etc. etc. So, over the past 13 elections, 7 have been won by the Republicans and 6 by the Democrats. And based on this data from Bloomberg and Saxo, interestingly enough, there is a significantly higher return 1 year after the election if a Democratic president was to be elected. So, is the mystery solved? Are the Democrats better for the stock market? Well, not yet. When I cross-checked this with Fidelity and BlackRock, they found no consistent relationship between election outcomes and also long-term stock market performance. In fact, over the long run, the US stock market has risen regardless of which party runs the White House. Anyway, all in all, the two candidates represent two very different visions for the future. Kamala Harris and the Democrats aim for a more active government role in shaping the economy, with a focus on green energy, healthcare, and infrastructure. Meanwhile, Donald Trump and the Republicans prefer a free market approach, supporting lower taxes, increased defense spending, and traditional energy. But regardless of who wins, US policies will definitely influence the global markets. So if you want to stay updated, do consider subscribing to our channel below. Until then, I wish you a very nice day ahead.